Hello everybody, my name is Andreas Krenzel. I own and run an immigration company, an immigration consultancy based in South Africa. And you get all the details further beside here the YouTube video. And in this video, I would like to maybe just talk 3-4 minutes about why it would be making sense for you to potentially look out for an immigration consultant, why you might want to have the assistance of an immigration consultant, in particular in Africa, but also in South Africa. What's the added value? And yeah, maybe even some pointers how to find the right one which fits. So that's the topic of this video. Maybe just a disclaimer, I was born and raised in Germany, so to talk about my own industry and why you should choose our services doesn't come natural to me, so you must excuse that. But yeah, so let's start. I think you know, being based in Africa, but I mean, I don't want to really make it too much about Africa, because as a matter of fact, there are immigration consultancies or immigration lawyers in basically all the countries in the world. Even when you move from one European nation to another one, and you might assume they don't need permits and residence, they do, and they get assisted by professional lawyers or consultants. So it's not a necessity only in Africa. I think in general, dealing with the authorities, the complexity, the contradictions in legislation and practical implementation is probably in a lot of areas of the world similar. And therefore our industry exists, and our industry obviously renders quite a helpful service. And as a matter of fact, we also make it much easier for the authorities, because the applications are usually prepared to a higher standard. So, but I think what potentially sets at least South Africa, but also some other African markets apart, is that there's a huge discrepancy between what is written in the law and what's the practical application. I do think there is a difference in Europe, where you have a very well-functioning public administration law. In a lot of African countries, you don't have that really. As a matter of fact, we often struggle because we cover about 25, 26 markets in Africa. We often actually struggle to find legislation, current legislation. It's not public, it's not uploaded. So that's the first struggle. The second struggle is then, even if you know the legislation, the practical implementation of it hugely varies. Okay, in South Africa, it varies from mission to mission. In other countries where you have a local submission, it doesn't vary that much, but it still varies a lot from the law. So I think, in essence, you need to have a lot of practical experience in Africa in order to really render a proper service for immigration in Africa. So the size of the company, the amount of cases they do, the potential track record, the years of experience do play a role. Because if you're only submitting 20 applications a month or 15 applications a month, then obviously you have way less experience than if you do 50 to 60 a month or even more. Okay, so that's maybe why an immigration consultant in Africa in particular is important, but I do think anywhere in the world this is the argument. So what should you look out for? Obviously it's all about personal choice. I do think, you know, at least I can speak now here for South Africa, and actually, matter of fact, for most African countries, it's an unregulated market. So unlike the UK or Australia or New Zealand or the US in particular, where that's really registered or reserved for lawyers, there is no formal registration for our profession. South Africa used to have that, immigration practitioner. I'm a registered immigration practitioner, but these days it's a voluntary body. It's not a statutory body anymore. So in South Africa, there is no objective limitation to call yourself an immigration consultant. Zambia does have an official registrar. So that's one exception, but most African countries, it's an unprotected industry. And with that, obviously, you invite a lot of less qualified, smaller providers who don't have the track record and maybe not the depth in their team to really render professional service. So maybe that just as a background information. I do think it's very important that you look at at the duration, how long the company really existed, and then obviously these days, Google reviews are important to look at, so that's maybe a distinguishing factor. Also, this disclaimer, I do think immigration is not a precise science. There's also not an objective right and wrong always, because obviously our industry, and that's applicable to everybody, we face the problem that we render a service, which is the preparation until the submission of the application. We don't render the service of getting the visa. That is adjudicated by the authorities, and often the authorities make decisions which don't make sense, or they just disagree and they're using their discretion. So bottom line is, we do not determine the outcome for the clients, and that sometimes leads to unhappy clients and is not a true reflection on the service they received. So I do suggest that you read a few Google reviews and not just one or two, because I don't think it's fair. Any company, including my own one, has occasionally bad reviews, and that's just basically due to maybe hidden assumptions, wrong assumption, which we didn't address. So I don't think that's the only criteria, but it's certainly one important one. As I said, size, I mentioned this already in this movie before. I do think the size of the team is important. And why is the size important? Because it comes with practical experience. Lots of cases, lots of practical experience, and that's what you need in Africa. You need practical experience, not just what you read in the laws. So I think that's really important. And then ideally, obviously, the qualification of the staff. But most immigration companies don't really put that on the website. Also, we used to have that when staff was still staying 5 or 6 years. This has changed since COVID tremendously. Even we have a higher staff turnaround, unfortunately, now, and updating the website sometimes doesn't really make sense anymore. But you want to look for legal background, ideally some lawyers on the team, right? Because it adds a little bit more credibility. And then what I usually recommend some corporate clients would be case studies on the website, an indication of bigger projects being managed or anything extraordinary. I think these are the things to look out for. And then potentially in South Africa, at least, formal recognition as an immigration practitioner is definitely a distinguishing factor. So these were typically the criteria you want to look out for in your consultancy. So what services do they actually do for you? I always say to my staff members who consult, we just not provide the information. The information these days is freely available on the web, on VFS. You get all the checklists. What we really do is the consulting, right? So we're trying to find a solution for your immigration. Our approach is very clear. We don't find a solution for you. You tell me what you want to do in South Africa, and then I tell you if the legislation covers that. So it's not the other way around. I know a lot of immigration companies might do this differently, but I think ethically we want to really consult people who really want to bring the country forward or just fit into the existing categories. So the consulting is really what you're looking for, right? Because the checklist is the information is easy. And then, yes, we guide through the whole process of compiling the application. So we trigger the documents you need to bring. We use a case management software, which is POPI, which is our South African data protection law, but it's also GDPR compliant, so European Union compliant, and obviously also UK and US legislation. So we use a case management software which makes the communication very easy. It's an online portal, and you upload and also the documents in a very safe environment, because emails obviously are not safe anymore. I do think that's a distinguishing factor potentially as well between immigration consultancies, at least in South Africa, but also in Africa. There are not many who are really using state-of-the-art software for the communication with the clients. So I think that's an important one. But what I wanted to say, so compiling the application is the service, and then really getting it ready for the submission, and then potentially also coaching you on the submission. So in South Africa, at least, where most applicants, first-time applicants, apply to South African mission, the coaching of the application submission is really important, because I do think there is occasionally a disbalance or imbalance, I think is the English word, between the expectations of our clients and how they are treated at the mission. So I think to manage these expectations is really, really important. Then it gets submitted, we follow up, and then hopefully the visa is issued. We check the correct visa, and then we put it in our database, and ideally we even remind our clients of the expiry 6 months before. So it's a quite a comprehensive journey, and then potentially you can add obviously permanent residence at a later stage or extension of a visa. But I mean the service scope I think is very similar with all consultancies or immigration firms. I do think what sets at least our firm apart is the ability to consult and to really solve, you know, and explain complex matters in a simple way. Yeah, and then obviously, ideally, how you guide the clients through the process, that it's smooth and really well communicated, that you proactively trigger the documents, etc., etc. So this adds all to the experience, and I think these are important points. Yeah, that's really what I wanted to say in this video update. So I do think it makes a lot of sense to use immigration consultancy. Is it totally required? Probably not. I think in South Africa, especially with VFS, there's a system where you can try it on your own. But my experience is often that then something is missing and something is not right. If you submit overseas, then I would say you definitely want to use a consultancy, because the requirements from the missions are often very different to what is required in the law. There are some exceptions, but in general, I think the clients are quite happy with that. And in the end, we're there to save time and give you peace of mind and just assure that this application really complies with the legal requirements. Okay. So if you want to get in contact with me or with my staff, you can click on all the contact buttons there beside the video. I hope you found this useful. And yeah, I look forward to speaking with you. Bye-bye.